On this episode, we visit Nashville to learn about the Tennessee Department of Transportation. We talk with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator, the Multimodal Planning Office Supervisor, and a Deputy Commissioner. Stay tuned.
We're in Nashville, Tennessee, talking with Whitney Davis, who's the Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator for the Tennessee Department of Transportation. What does a Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator do?
Each state has a Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator with their DOT, and it runs the gamut from state to state, but essentially, you oversee all the things bicycle and pedestrian. Historically, DOTs have planned for motorized use, and for the last, I think, about 20 years, there have been bicycle and pedestrian coordinators that provide expertise on pedestrian crossings and bicycle lanes, and provide basically we field questions from the public that are bicycle and pedestrian. We convey their concerns internally, and we help foster a process in our organization to accommodate bicycle and pedestrian use.
What's bicycling culture like here in Tennessee? Do people bike a lot?
It varies. Tennessee is a big state and it's largely rural, but it has 4 major cities. And those 4 major cities are making incredible strides in terms of cycling. And there are a lot of smaller communities in the state that are, trying to keep healthy, trying to keep vital. And one of the ways they see that they can do that is through tourism. And so they're turning oftentimes to bicycle tourism. Now, pedestrians, we lump bicycle and pedestrian together, and they're sort of different things. So, the culture in Nashville here, where our headquarters is and, where I'm centered, it's one of the fastest growing cities in the country. And we are being forced, whether we want to or not, to address our congestion issues. Our infrastructure cannot keep up with the growth, and so we are biking, we are walking for health. We are biking and walking because it is sometimes the only way to get around. So the culture here is changing rapidly. I think that especially at TDOT, my cohort, Jessica, will be on camera here soon, and she's going to speak with you very specifically about some of the programs we have going on at TDOT. But we're very excited about the culture within our organization. We're a statewide organization, and sometimes it takes a lot longer for government to adjust. And we have some things coming down the pike that we think that are going to move particularly pedestrian accommodation along.
And you have that issue that bikes and peds are lumped together, even though often they have very different needs.
Right.
Is that a problem that sometimes one tends to overshadow the other when they get lumped together?
Well, bicycling, I come from the Department of Natural Resources work. I worked for the Iowa DNR, and I ran the trails program. I was the state trails coordinator. And, we always said that hikers, it's really hard to get hikers organized. It's really hard to get walkers organized. It's, we do it because we enjoy it, because we like, hiking because maybe it's solitary, or walking. That's just how we get places, right? Whereas cyclists or, mountain bikers, they're enthusiasts. And so I would say that bicycling gets more attention just because there are more advocacy organizations. Walking just doesn't sound as sexy. It's not as, saleable. But in fact, all of us walk. And in fact, so pedestrians die at a faster rate than motorists do, than bicyclists do. And so, there are Vision Zero campaigns happening all across the country now that are focusing on reducing pedestrian death. And that is, there is no exception to that here in Tennessee. We're also focused on those efforts. And I think that bicycling is going to, I think that walking and reducing pedestrian deaths is going to be the catalyst for change in the state, because we all want to reduce the deaths. There's no arguing with that, and it's well documented that if you slow traffic down, not as many people die. Period. So, slowing traffic down while not generating congestion is our challenge, right? Like I said, at the state, we're working statewide, and our designers and planners say, we're all for economic development that arises with a road diet. We're all for pedestrian safety and bicycling safety and reducing deaths on the whole, but we still face a congestion issue, and the public is going to be in an uproar if we do a road diet here or if we do a traffic circle here. And, so I see one of my big jobs at TDOT is educating the culture within our organization so that our designers and planners know, and if they already do know, can advocate to the public and say, look, even though we're doing a road diet here, you're not going to see a slowdown in traffic. Even though we're doing a traffic circle there, we are still, there are that many more people in this culture that are biking and walking because it's safe now to do so, and you have that many more people not in cars. And, don't forget transit. That's an important part of the puzzle too. So we're talking cultural change. We have to make adjustments as a culture, and it's the chicken or the egg thing, right? Do we plan for a culture that is younger, doesn't want to buy cars, they're millennials, they want to live close to where they work, they want to live close to where they play, they want to be active, and so I think the answer is that we plan for the future, and currently we plan for what has been and what is, and it takes. We were talking earlier. It takes a lot of people pulling together to make a cultural change.
We're talking with Jessica Wilson, who supervises the Multimodal Planning Office at Tennessee DOT. What does the Multimodal Planning Office do?
So we do a variety of things. We house the bicycle and pedestrian program. We also do technical assistance for transit agencies. We're kind of the complete streets arm of the department. So we're in charge of policy and implementation of complete streets across the state.
What is Complete Streets, and what's been happening with your policy on it?
So Complete Streets is basically assuring that you're encountering our guests' engineering and planning for all users throughout the project delivery process. So from, when we start planning a project all the way through to construction, that we're making sure that we're accountable to all users, whether that be motorists, truck drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users. We're looking at all those folks when we're delivering projects.
And do you have a new Complete Streets policy? What's been going on there?
Yes, we created a new Complete Streets policy in 2015. We've had one since about 2004, but it kind of sat on the shelf and collected dust, so to say. So in 2015, our new commissioner signed the new Complete Streets policy, and now we're in the process of implementing it. So it's a pretty big undertaking. We're doing some updates to our design guidelines. We've created a multimodal planning manual, and we're going to start doing training to our engineers and planners across the state on how to use this guidelines.
And a lot of people are thinking, well, the State Department of Transportation, that's Interstate 40. Where do pedestrians and bicycles fit into what you do?
Well, a lot of our roads are interstates and limited access facilities, but also a lot of our roads are main streets that go through smaller towns or even big towns. Like, for example, here in Nashville, Lower Broad, which is where all the honky-tonks are, and that's where that's a state route. So that's where a lot of people are walking and out biking. So we touch on a lot of communities across the state and have a lot of input into how those how those facilities are designed.
So when you hear from the public, I assume the usual public hearing process every time you're doing a project. Does the word pedestrian, word bicycle, do those come up often from the public?
Honestly, probably not as much as I would like it to. I think a lot of times the people that go to public hearings are people that live along that corridor. They're more concerned about the impacts to their properties, so they're not really talking about pedestrians. We've been trying to prompt a little bit more when we're speaking to local stakeholders about the importance of making sure to plan for the pedestrian. We had a project just the other day where we're widening it to 3 lanes, and there's 2 schools that are right there along that route, and nobody had really talked about the needs for pedestrians, even though there's 2 schools there. So we kind of prompted them, said, hey, what about connections between these 2 schools? Do you think people will have a reason to walk? And all of a sudden they wrote back and said, yes, we have all these. They had like 5 or 6 reasons that people would need to walk between those 2 schools. And so you kind of have to prompt and get it out of them sometimes.
So Nashville, where your office is located, fast-growing city, how does that impact pedestrians?
Yeah, so I'm a rare Nashville native. There's not many of us that live here anymore, but it has rapidly grown in the past few years. You can look around Nashville and just see cranes everywhere. We even joke that that's our state bird. And it's great to have economic development and new people coming in and new ideas, and that's wonderful, but it's frustrating from a perspective of pedestrian when there's all these construction sites across Nashville. And for example, the other day I was walking back from lunch to my office, and both sides of the block were closed to pedestrians, and I was like, well, where am I supposed to go? You know, one sign points to the other block, and the other block says I'm closed, and it points to the block that is closed. So it's just really frustrating.
So you've had complete streets policy a decade ago, brand new one a couple years ago that you're hoping will be successful. Are people, in and out of the department, when you say transportation, are they automatically thinking pedestrians, bicycles, transit, as well as automobiles, which may have been the beginning and end of it back in the 1960s?
I've seen a huge improvement in the past 12 years that I've been at TDOT, just more people talking about walking and biking. I don't think we're completely there yet. A lot of times, like for example, my group will review environmental documents and we'll see that, no accommodation has been presented for bicyclists or pedestrians, so we kind of have to gently remind them that needs to be included. But for the most part, I think, especially as the younger generation is coming in and a lot of the older generation is retiring, that we're seeing a huge shift in how people think about biking and walking and transportation in general.
We're in Nashville, Tennessee, talking with Toke Somashakan, who's a deputy commissioner with Tennessee DOT. What does a deputy commissioner do?
Well, it's pretty unique in Tennessee. We've got 2 or 3 deputy commissioners that run the department. I, in particular, oversee the planning work that we do, oversee the environmental work, and oversee the multimodal side of our business at TDOT. So oversee 3-4 major departments at the department, and it's a job that I've been in now for about almost 6 years. The last time I think you were in Nashville, I was in a different role. Yeah. When we got a chance to talk, but it's been a good transition from the city to state government.
And a lot of people, I think, state DOTs haven't changed much since the 1920s. Yeah. What's going on that's innovative at Tennessee DOT?
Well, that's a great question, John. It's one of those things where, like you said, DOTs have been around for so long. Ours has been around for about 102 years. And we get into these patterns and these cultures of doing things a certain way, and we just kind of stick with that way of doing business. And DOTs, in my opinion, probably go through 30, 40-year cycles before things really start to evolve and change, and the people there look at the business differently. So it's probably been that way at TDOT, but we've been very fortunate with this administration, with Governor Haslam and Commissioner Schroer. Our focus has been a little bit more on pushing that innovation, And on the multimodal front, which is a big passion of mine, as you know, we've tried to infuse that through the department. It takes a while. Before you know it, 8 years is gone and an administration is on its way out the door. But we've tried, and we've been successful in many cases in infusing some of the multimodal things that really the community wants. It's not just an idea that people like us or people who are planners or the progressives, as they say, not just things they want, but what communities expect from DOTs. I think they look to cities traditionally to be the ones that are out front, a little bit more doing things, but we've said that we can do those things as well. And so some of the things we've done, for example, is we created a multimodal access grant program. It's a $30 million program to help communities across the state fill in gaps along state networks, either gaps in the transit sense, the pedestrian sense, or the bikeability sense. And so we've given out, several dozens of grants, probably more than 30 grants over the last 3 years from that money. And communities absolutely love it. When you go to MPO meetings and you go to RPO meetings across the state, it's one
MPO, RPO.
I'm sorry, MPO. Good. Glad you brought that up. Metropolitan Planning Organization and Regional Planning Organization. Regional ones are the more rural, smaller planning organizations. MPO, 50,000 people or more within those planning jurisdictions. So a lot of excitement about those grants. We have a policy internally, multimodal access policy, that we are also saying if we're building a new project, if we're retrofitting a project, that we will use that policy to guide our decision making. The implementation side of that is just coming around. We've done the policy signed by the commissioner, signed by me and the chief engineer. But now we actually need to go through the process of making sure we're embedding those policy guidelines in our decision making through the department.
And a lot of people from outside the state, they think of a handful of large cities, Nashville where we are, Memphis, Chattanooga, Knoxville. But you say you got your RPOs representing the more rural areas, the smaller towns.
Sure.
What does a multimodal policy mean for a small town somewhere?
Yeah, that's another good question, Matty, because I think a lot of people expect a multimodal policy or a complete streets policy, is what some people call it, to be a sort of a one-size-fits-all approach to guiding how a transportation system develops, and it varies. In a suburban area, it's going to look different. In a rural area, it's going to look different. In an urban area, it's going to look different. In a more rural area, a complete streets or a multimodal access policy could essentially just mean a road that has a wide shoulder where someone can walk on it if they want to on that shoulder, or bike. Because in a rural area, you don't necessarily want to build a sidewalk if you're out in the hills or out in the middle of nowhere. You don't want that expense, and you don't want to interrupt the character that's already there in that sense. You don't want to pour a bunch of concrete in the middle of nowhere. So just having a road that is sufficient enough for the car travel, and a 8-foot, 9-foot, 7-foot shoulder that somebody could bike on, or if somebody wanted to walk somewhere could utilize, works just as fine. So it varies a lot, and we've tried to make sure that our designers, our engineers throughout the department, they understand that this is not a mandate that says you have to build a sidewalk, everywhere now. That's what this policy means. It doesn't mean that. It means you have to look at the context that you're working in and figure out how to make sure the appropriate facility is built.
And you get into a small town, the main streets, also a state highway. Mm-hmm. What's that going to look like?
Yeah, so when you get into small towns, and we've done those, we've given grants in places like that. It's more about that. I mean, it's about making sure those town squares are lively. In a lot of places across the country, when the downturn in the economy hit, last time you were here was right around that time. One of the times we talked in 07, 08, 09, a lot of those town centers just dried up. And part of what we believe in reinvesting in those communities can do in this way is revive the private side's interest in coming back to those town squares. We've helped build facades on building, upgrade facades on buildings, upgrade sidewalks in those small downtowns, bike lanes, curb cuts, whatever it may be that's needed in places like that. We've tried to invest there to sort of re-energize those small towns, and we've done several of those enhancement grants from the U.S. DOT. Some of those we've done them in small towns. We've done our multimodal grants where it's impacting again sort of a rural downtown, a rural town square, and some of those to me are probably the most exciting projects that we do, because a lot of times in our business we end up building a lot of big projects, $50, $60, $70 million highway projects, and you don't really get a sense of an attachment to the community when you build something like that. I mean, the ribbon cutting is always great. You come out with the mayors and the senators and representatives, everybody's there, and you do a ribbon cutting, and everybody goes home, and that structure is just there. So that structure helps you get across the river, or helps you get to work, or whatever you need to do, but there's no attachment to it. When you do a town center, it's almost like you've created or you've helped reinvigorate a place. So you've helped liven a place again. And so these people are not just passing through. The customers, the people who work there, some people actually live in those places. You're not passing through. This is their place. This is their part of their identity. And when you help reinvigorate that, there's nothing that beats that. It's a totally different project, and I absolutely love those.
And our Tennessee residents, local governments in Tennessee, are they coming to realize that TDOT is more than just Interstate 40?
Yeah, that's always a challenge for us. It's one of the things that I focus on a lot, is to make sure that we hear people out and that they have a voice with us, not just in a media sense, but in the community engagement sense. And we've got a community relations department that's very good at sending out social media messages and all the mediums that exist. But one of the things I'm really passionate about is when we have a meeting, that we truly hear people out in those discussions. That we're not just saying, hey, TDOT, we've got a road plan and we're about to build a road and good luck, but that we're really getting a sense of, okay, if they want to see the road, true, but what does the road look like? So one of my favorite sayings, I got this from somebody in New York at a sustainability meeting. They said, you can't just make sure you're building the right project. You've got to make sure you're building the project right. So those are two different things. You got to build the right project. So one, is it needed? And then if it's needed, how do you make sure that what you're designing, what you're building is the right design? So that's the context component of it. So is it the right thing? If it's the right thing, then make sure you do the right thing right. And it's one of the things that I try to make sure that when we're engaging folks in the community, that we're no doubt getting a true sense of what they want to see in the project that's being built.
And when the department adopts complete streets policy like you did a couple years ago, and puts these other policies in place that hopefully is going to lead to projects being built right. What's the key to making sure that that's absorbed by the institution? And so someday when Tokes has moved on to his next position, that your ideas are live on, that communities are paid attention to.
Yeah, that's to me really that's honestly the hardest part of what we do when you talk about innovation and bringing innovation, is how sustainable is that innovation, and how do you create a culture where when you're gone, people are not people are supportive of it. People say, "Oh no, we did that, and it's something we need to continue to do." It's a challenge. It's a challenge because DOTs are built across the country, across the United States, in a way where a lot of people end up there, and it's almost like a permanent place of work. I mean, it becomes like another family for a lot of people, and it's great. It's great that it's that way. That you come to a DOT and you're there. You say, "Look, once you get that 1 year in, you're like, look, I'm enjoying this. I see a path for growth, and I'm sticking with this, and I'm going to put in my 30 years. I'm going to put in my 25 years." We have a lot of people with us who are, on the 40-year mark. So when somebody's been doing something along the way for 25, 30 years, and they're now a senior engineer or a senior planner, whatever it may be, and somebody comes in and says, "Hey, by the way, here's what communities are really looking for now," more than likely they're going to look at you and say, "Yeah, sure, I'm going to change what I've been doing all this time to reinvent myself for you and your great ideas." No, I don't think so. So getting their buy-in is essential, and working on their buy-in, and really, I think it's important to. You've heard the term meeting people at the point of need. So engineers, just like any other profession, they are passionate about solving problems. That's what they want to do. They're very quantitative in their thinking. And so whatever this new solution is that a lot of people are looking to, you have to somehow bring it and connect it to where an engineer may be coming from. And I think that's part of what we have to do. But I think one exciting thing all the time, though, is the fact that there are new engineers coming in constantly. So a lot of the 30, 40-year vets are stepping away. And the newer crop that we have come in, I mean, you can tell that they're excited about multimodalism and not just saying, "Hey, we need to build the biggest highway possible," but they're saying, people are going to be getting about in different ways. And me as a millennial, that's the young engineer talking, here's how I like to get about. I like to Uber, I like to use the bus, I want to ride my bike, I want to walk, I want to, drive sometimes. So, with that kind of new crop coming in, I think it's helping with some of those needs to sustain the approach that we now have.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.